Ooh, Cash Patel can't let you in. Fine, but you won't be able to talk. I was
Oh
kidding.
boy.
Cash Patel does not watch DSA panels.
We
He
just
has
have the disembodied voice of Chris as the mascot of security in the chat.
I haven't put makeup on. Fine. You all want to see my fucking bald head? Okay. Jesus.
You got to do a full face for a security panel, man. I don't know what to tell you. All right, got a few more coming.
Zemo Frankenstein. That's definitely a real name.
All right, y'all. So I think we've got enough people in. We'll go ahead and get started. And then Chris, if you can just kind of let people in as they trickle in throughout the panel, that'd be great. So thank you everybody for coming. My name is Cliff Connolly. I am one of your NPC members in DSA, and I am the chair of the Red Rabbits Security Commission. We've got a few other members of the steering committee of the Security Commission here tonight helping out with the panel. So thank you, Chris, and everybody else that's been helping out with that. Big shouts out. And then also big thanks to all the panelists. So this is really cool. We have panelists from several different DSA chapters to go over what kind of security work their chapter is doing, what their security body in their chapter looks like. Some of these have been around for a very long time and may have a lot of advice to share for the rest of us. Some of these are brand new, and I think that'll be a really interesting perspective to hear as well. What kind of challenges people face as they like first start to set up security work in DSA, what kind of questions they have, what's working, what isn't, et cetera. So I'm really excited to get to hear from everybody. I won't yap for too long, but just to kind of briefly introduce why we wanted to do this in the first place. Historically, DSA has not had a ton of national infrastructure for security work. And again, security work is just the work that it takes to keep DSA spaces safe. So whether that's protest marshaling when we're out at an event or basically running the door at a meeting, just the very basic security practices that various DSA chapters have in place. And because there's not a ton of national infrastructure for that, there's a lot of variation between what the security practices of different chapters look like. There's not a lot of standardization in this regard. So that's something that the Red Rabbits Security Commission, which just got started this year, is looking to try and help out and fix and kind of create a standardized template for chapters, especially that don't have security practices or a security body in place yet to be able to create that. But we figured a great starting point before we get our standardized security trainings rolled out, hopefully in the next couple of months, would be to hear from the chapters that are already doing this work independently and see what their security practices look like. So that is the purpose of being here this afternoon. We are going to be hearing from these chapters. Hopefully somebody interrupt me, Chris, or somebody if the screen share isn't working, but these are the chapters that we'll be hearing from today. So we have the Red Rabbits from Twin Cities. We have the Queer Fight Club from Oklahoma City. We have the Security Working Group from Tucson, the Immigrant Justice Working Group from New Jersey, the Red Rabbits of Philadelphia, the Red Bats, which I love, from Austin, Texas, and then the safety team from Portland. So big thanks to the comrades for from these chapters for coming out and being able to share with us what their security practices look like. I think this is going to be really helpful. This is who we have speaking for us. I'm not 100% sure if I think we have a couple people running late. So if that's the case, we may switch up the order a little bit. But these are the comrades we have speaking. I'll let them introduce themselves as we get to their chapters in the panel here. So we can go ahead and get started with Twin Cities. So Shannon H., you are good to go. Chris, if we can unmute Shannon, she can take it away.
Thank you, Cliff. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon, she, her pronouns, with the Twin Cities Red Rabbits. Kind of newer to DSA. By newer, I mean I've been around for about a year. So I've kind of been with Red Rabbits since we started it about 6 months ago. So yeah, let's just get into it. I'm ready for next slide. So, Twin Cities Red Rabbits is a recently revived group. We did have a Red Rabbits contingent in the past, and it just kind of fell apart in recent years. But we saw a need for more community defense and wanted to take on some more outreach initiatives as part of our chapter's Melt Ice priorities. And members that were interested kind of rejoined the group, and it's been back. Now we're working closely with kind of approved groups that we have worked with in the past, that we have good working relationships with, and have been building more organizing and tactical talent from within our DSA group. And the hope is that one day our own working groups and subcommittees can hold their own sort of mass actions, as well as we can lead our own in-chapter martial trainings. Um, we have only been around for about 6 months now. This kind of started back with a lot of the ice activity in the city, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. So I feel like we've learned a lot in those 6 months, and really excited to share some of it with you. Then next slide. So in the past, we've had a lot of coalition members that have sort of been working on their own with their partners and then bringing asks back to the Red Rabbits themselves. But now we have a political action and coalition committee or PAC team that puts all of those coalition members together in one group so that we can communicate and get a little more of a structured approval process for what asks and actions that the marshals actually get calls for. In order to facilitate those calls, we do have a signal chat that's about 50 DSA members strong, where approved actions are posted and members can apply for roles or volunteer for roles as a foot, bike, or car marshal. We love our car marshals here in the Twin Cities. They're a great way to help bike and foot marshals with takedowns on intersections, as well as hold the front and back end for the rallies and marches and kind of provided that extra level of security for our actions. We have a designated day of action coordinator that helps facilitate the communication between our Red Rabbit members and whatever groups may be organizing on that day of. We bring the equipment to the events. Our group's very fortunate to have had a bunch of really nice walkie-talkies donated, so we kind of help facilitate those communications on the ground as well. And then next slide. Thank you. So one of the best things that about or that has come about from sort of restarting our Red Rabbits is that coalition partners have really opened up a lot of opportunities for us to put a lot of our union members and other DSA voices to be able to speak at these actions and really talk directly to community members that may not realize that we actually have a lot of beliefs and ideas in common. So it's really helped grow the chapter and bring in new people, so that's been a wonderful win for us. We've built a go box of over 20 high-vis vests. We have waterproof Rocky Talkies is what they're called. They were donated to us by an organization, which has been just absolutely amazing to be able to provide. And we have other equipment, inflatable cones, and then we have some PPE or safety gear ready to go in case anything happens and we need to provide some more additional support. This has been great because we can offer this to our coalition partners who may have the organization skills but don't necessarily have all of the walkie-talkies and communication equipment, and we can help support a larger Marshall team than maybe they would have been able to on their own. And it's also good because it's open for like our other committees and working groups for their own actions that maybe they don't need as much Marshall support, but they still need that communication on the ground. So that's been a great thing for our chapter. I think part of our biggest challenges is we've had a large amount of actions from such a wide variety of coalition partners in a short time that it's led to a lot of burnout in the group. But I think the PAC team, and as far as like filtering a lot of our martial asks, is going to do a great job of kind of keeping that burnout down and directing our Red Rabbits group to the actions that we want to be participated in. And yeah, that's kind of all we got. Just being such a new team, we are still always building and always looking for new ways that we can up our security. And yeah, that's kind of all for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate you sharing and really, really glad that Twin Cities has comrades like
Mhm.
you and the rest in the Red Rabbits team to be able to do this work. I'm sure you would have preferred to have it before ICE came to town, but I'm glad that y'all got it together. So that's awesome. We're really happy to see that.
Yes, thank
Um,
you.
Absolutely. So next we have Oklahoma City Queer Fight Club scheduled. I think Jess, who's going to be speaking for Oklahoma City, is running a few minutes late, but is on the way. So I'm just going to zoom right past these slides to Tucson. I think we have Gene, I believe, is here and good to go. So Chris, if you can unmute Gene for me, then we can get started with Tucson.
Hey guys, Gene here, Tucson DSA. Yeah, so in Tucson DSA, we have a security working group. We also have what's called the Workers Wellness Collective. Um, and yeah, both are relatively new. We get next slide. Thank you. So I'll start by talking about the Worker Wellness Collective, which is slightly older. Um, the Workers Wellness Collective has been renamed a few times, and I don't know that this name is set in stone yet, but we wanted something expansive enough to include a lot of different activities that kind of the socialist workout or socialist workout club wasn't really giving us. But yeah, born out of a long-standing interest, galvanized by the realities of marshaling and protesting, I had a situation where someone almost hit me with their car. So taking like that personal experience led me to take this a lot more seriously. Um, so So in terms of participation in the Wellness Collective so far, we had originally 10 to 15 attendees for about 3 weeks. Then we had a sharp drop off, and now we have a solid 6 participants. We've been challenged by weather. It's really hot here in Tucson, and we've had to move the events up an hour. And also May Day preparation. We spent a lot of time preparing for May Day rather than going out and working out. So we found a neighborhood park that's close for a few of us with some equipment there, but also easy enough for us to bring equipment with a focus on cardio, stretching, and like very light weightlifting. And then a smaller group of us actually were able to get some gym memberships together for relatively inexpensively and have been able to work out together. And this really feeds into marshaling for us because we're working on things like balance. I think last weekend they were practicing rolling and also practicing like what you should do if you get knocked to the ground. So it's been incorporating some marshaling stuff into the actual workouts. Yeah, I've found it really really useful as someone who it was a little bit of a runner in the past, but have never touched weights. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so the last one, if you saw that image, it was kind of intense, the black and the red. So we're the visual vocabulary for events and recruitment to folks is really important. So we have an artist in the chapter who's actually done work for a number of electeds. I think when he lived in New York City, who made this little running cactus for us. We haven't adopted it as a mascot or anything, and you can see it's still socialist workout, but it's less intense, more friendly. Tucson is really really hot, so we're trying to figure out what we can do indoors and how we can work around that in the summer. At one point, we were thinking about, well, do we want to do yoga at our socialist elected's office, something like that? Um, I'm just a big believer that exercise brings you mental clarity and builds a really strong community. So I think it goes hand in hand with safety and security. Yeah, if we go to the next slide, please. Great. So now talking about the security working group proper, came out of a realization that very few people were trained in de-escalation, nor did we have agreed practices for security and safety. So, for example, if someone comes into a Tucson DSA general meeting and starts yelling at the top of their lungs, not saying that's going to happen, but like something like that, right? We don't have a procedure for how to deal with that person or how to respond to that. So that kind of threw us off. And it just became a concern really after the whole Charlie Kirk fiasco. And I don't know how many folks know, but a comrade had to evacuate in Salt Lake. So that really kind of, I think, spooked us a little bit. But yeah, we just no standards on how to do this. So we're still working on training and procedures for our security working group. It's pretty early. We've met about 3 times. And our focus so far has been specifically on the general meeting. And also we've done some marshaling together. And there's some marshals in the chapter that have been marshaling with other organizations for longer, but a lot of us are pretty green or new to this kind of work. So we've recently developed a memo for security at general meetings and chapter events, and our steering committee is going to review that at tomorrow's steering committee meeting for Tucson. We made some new signs for the chapter. One thing we found out was that at some of our meetings, people didn't know how to get to the actual meeting, which is not a safe thing. Like if you have to navigate a new space you've never been to, if you're already someone who is like taking the risk of going to an organization or an event that you know maybe a little bit about, or like you're stepping out of your comfort zone, I want you to be able to get there correctly. So that to me is an important part of security and safety. We also compiled a budget for supplies, and I actually have to make a slight correction here on this last one. We were not able to use the Mayday grant, unfortunately. The reason being is because Tucson DSA was just recently incorporated. So we were not incorporated in time, and we also did not have a bank account set up, I think, right when we passed the incorporation threshold. That's not my area of expertise in chapter business, or I haven't been caught up quite yet. I'll learn more at the meeting tomorrow. But we were able to buy some Mesh-tastic equipment and some vests and stuff. But I'll talk about that in a second. We go to the next slide. Yeah, so this body, unfortunately, does not have really a structure yet. We have a rotating meeting facilitator, a taskmaster to follow up with assigned tasks between meetings. As I'm sure everyone here knows, when 2 weeks go by between meetings, it's very easy for people to forget what they wanted to do or what their task was. So we have someone who's going through actually operating off a master task list. We use running meeting notes, which is really important. So we don't have to switch between documents. It's a underrated thing about organizing, is keeping it all in the same place. We're also dealing with the complexities of what training can be and with compliance, and that's not quite clear to us how we should actually be acting in a security role. So right now we're just focusing on basic de-escalation. And we're collaborating with existing protest marshaling bodies in Tucson, so which have paper DSA members, equipment, and offer trainings, which is really great. So there's already 3 or 4 DSA members that, since about the start of the second Trump administration, have been doing this almost weekly for quite a while, offering security at different events. So we have some wisdom and some organization, and those folks are pretty sophisticated in the trainings they're offering. I'm not going to be able to go because I'm going to be at a wedding, but next weekend they're offering a chemical weapons training, and there's an opportunity to be pepper sprayed with some lesser, not quite cop grade, but like about a third of cop grade pepper spray. I was unfortunately I'm not going to be able to go to that, which is a bummer, but yeah, we have a great opportunity to collaborate. Yeah, with those groups. We've got, if anyone's curious, you can look it up on social media. It's Tucson Safety Teams, that organization. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so wins and challenges so far. So challenges, navigating compliance. This is work that almost none of membership has experience with, making sure that our trainings actually match the realities of what a 501c4 can do, what DSA can do. So that is complicated. Desert weather, air quality. So even if it's not terribly hot, like say you meet out at 8 a.m., the air quality out here might be terrible because there might be a forest fire. There was a scare with that a few weeks ago. And it was really dusty one day when I went out to exercise, and that actually messed me up for a day or two. Schedules. There's lots of events going on, but there's like one interesting kind of complicated third component here. I'm not going to talk about it too long, but just like this is the reality of organizing, is there are people who are going to be interested in these matters and are going to caucus around these issues in your chapter sometimes, around security, around protest marshaling, because other members may not see it as a priority or view it with the same importance. So we do have a new small caucus that is kind of facilitating both of these groups, where membership is basically 1-to-1. It's not quite 1-to-1, but it's almost 1-to-1. So it's just a local caucus, and this is pretty much entirely what it's concerned with, which is nice, but poses some governance and communication issues sometimes. And then our wins. We had a really strong marshal presence at May Day, thanks to the security working group and the equipment secured. So all of our coalition partners thanked us for our presence for marshaling at May Day. So that was really great. We had, I think, so we're a chapter. We just hit 300 members, and I think we had 10 marshals on May Day, which was great. And I think about 2/3 of them had a radio, and all of them had vests. So, although some of the vests might have been provided by PSL, I can't remember. But we did a really fantastic job marshaling that event. The last thing I'll say, in terms of the complexities, is Tucson safety team, and I'm sure you guys are seeing this in your communities, is a lot of these groups are going to go out and marshal every single event. And how do you like set those priorities, right, as a group? Because there's going to be some people who are really eager, and we already heard one presenter talk about burnout. But our focus has been, as a group right now, thinking about our general meetings and events. And then I think a lesser priority for us currently, partially because it's being handled decently well in Tucson already by existing groups, is that protest marshaling. I think that's my last slide. So thank you, guys.
Awesome, Gene. Really appreciate you coming out to share all that with us. Really glad to hear that y'all are prioritizing the chapter and then still able to provide some benefits in terms of security for other parts of the community. That's awesome. And very happy to hear that y'all are taking compliance very, very seriously. We definitely on this Red Rapids Security Commission at the national level, we definitely share that zeal for compliance, and are working very, very closely with staff to make sure that all of the standardized trainings we have coming to you shortly have all been cleared and good to go, so that there's no question marks or gray area about what kind of work and what kind of training chapters are able to engage in. So again, thank you, Gene. Thank you, Tucson. We're gonna rewind. We've got Jess in the chat now, so it's gonna be Jess H, I believe, Chris, and then we will come on back for Oklahoma City here. So I'll wait for Jess to unmute.
Hey guys, can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Sorry I was late today. Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Queer Fight Club, which Oklahoma City DSA have like a formal Red Rabbit presence or anything. But Queer Fight Club, if you'll go ahead to the next slide, and I'll just start talking about it. So Queer Fight Club provides free, inclusive consent and trauma-informed self-defense, aid, and community defense training. We've been running for almost 2 years now. We've been in development and planning for over 3 years. We actually have almost $4,000 in assets and fundraising, including 3 CPR mannequins with add-on boobs, a gut wound simulator for wound packing practice, mats, pads, targets, all of the stuff you would need to teach things safely and well. And I know some of you are looking at this and thinking, well, what is community defense? You might be thinking that. We've defined community defense sort of as anything you might need to know before or after you have to defend yourself or someone else. So that includes all the detailed first aid training, de-escalation, and a number of other skills related to making a safe community, including things like finding a good therapist and doing your taxes. That bottom little bullet there is just some of the groups that we have brought in to talk about things related to this, which is awesome. I mean, de-escalation was a cool skill to cover. Next slide, please. So, Queer Fight Club's goal was to be DSA sponsored and community supported, not run wholly by DSA or by our physical venue host. So actually based some of that on Red Rabbit's existence as a separate 501c from the DSA structure. We have not fully separated from the DSA, nor do we plan to. We plan to continue in like a sponsorship type role, mostly for liability and tax purposes in terms of, hey, we want people who like sign our waivers to not, if someone is being malicious, we don't want that to come back to the DSA. We don't have the resources to finish that process quite yet, but what we're Each of our classes is an hour and a half long. We cover in each class a community defense skill and a self-defense skill with a warm-up and an icebreaker. So we share those resources afterwards that we use for instruction to people who want to continue to practice or learn more. What we call our learning labs are actually a pretty big component of resource structure. They're an open gym space for people to use to practice community defense or martial arts skills with trained instructors present, or to help answer questions, demonstrate different techniques, as well as for participants to use the mats and gear to practice safely. So the learning labs kind of depend on what the people want to learn and work on, what they feel they would like to do. We have a pretty good sparring press. We have people who've been bringing like gloves and gear and actually working on what does it look like to get out of holds. We have people who've asked for, hey, I want to work on this specific self-defense skill so I feel more confident. And we've had people show up and be like, hey, I want to practice CPR, or I want to practice wound packing or impaled object stabilization. And so it's a space for us to do that. Learning labs actually do follow traditional Fight Club rules, and that they aren't open to the public. You have to have already signed the waiver and been to class to practice at least one skill before we'll let you in sort of that free practice space, because that does have a little bit less structure in terms of instruction than our normal classes. We also have a team of volunteer co-facilitators and instructors. So we use co-facilitator as a catch-all term for people helping organize QFC. It includes EMTs and paramedics, martial artists, some administrative people, and our internal crisis team. We have a range of martial skills with a variety of experience. I am a first-degree black belt. There are people who've done sumo wrestling, judo, all of that, who come in and help with the different skills. And we do talk about not just the martial arts application, but like how the skills interact with one another across disciplines. Some martial arts are very like, judo is very focused on, hey, you're already on the ground. You're going to be throwing someone from the ground. Skills like taekwondo are focused on like, well, you want to hit them from a distance and get away. But different applications of that have like different varieties of use. Self-defense situations. You're not always going to be in a perfect situation to hit someone with a competition style blow. So we do get to talk about that and practice those skills together and be like, well, here's a weakness of this technique this way. How else can we share this technique in ways that will like make those weaknesses clear to people, instead of just going, okay, this is the one true way to punch, nothing else will work. We have 2 instructors in class each skill, primary instructor and a secondary instructor. If we're doing community defense or something based on slides, that second person does end up running the slides and helping answer questions. But for martial arts skills in particular, it allows us to demonstrate a skill as well as, you know, have someone walking around and making sure people are doing it safely. Our crisis team is at least 2 people. They help de-escalate if a stressful situation arises. They help us deal with safety issues or emotional or trauma-related issues or instances during class. So it's a great resource to help keep our participants safe in a variety of ways, to help keep everyone engaged. And then we also have someone at the front of house, like watching the door and helping have new participants fill out waivers, that sort of thing. Currently, we require 4 people to successfully run a session. That's 5 people at the start, technically, or 4 people throughout, because we do need to have someone on that front door, especially at the start, to watch for people. Next slide, please. All right. So I get to talk about some of our wins and some of our challenges right now. So far, over the past 2 years, we've had over 154 participants. We have a pretty solid core group, about 50 people who are showing up routinely learning skills. And we have a fairly developed, although it's not as developed as we'd like, shareable online resource document. That resource document is not intended to be a substitute for attending class and like working on the skills and the presence of people who know how to do them well. But we can share that and make that available with other groups. And it does have some YouTube videos, some of our in-house material that we've created, a lot of resources for that. We also created an online community through Discord that spontaneously engaged in mutual aid and medical advocacy. They've actually gone so far as to organize ASL classes and sessions, because we do have some participants with priority ASL needs who were not taught ASL. Moving furniture, getting people moved into new houses. There's pretty good free cycling going on in that group. And we've done medical advocacy specifically for participants with communication difficulties or family members who are restricting their access to necessary medications. So that's pretty cool. We've hosted external events, both for fundraising and to teach self-defense skills to other segments of the community. We don't volunteer our external community defense skills typically because you take on weirdly more liability if you're like, hey, I'm going to give you FAID and CPR training, but I'm not going to license you in any way. And there are other organizations that do things like that. Local queer affirming churches, our local library system have both approached us for this and paid us to instruct them in those skills, which has been one way to get the funding to continue our program. We've even had requests from the local roller derby team to be security marshals and instruct their participants in basic self-defense as well. Finally, for awesome wins, we've provided protest support and medics to our community, including for our local bike march, for several pro-Palestine events, and for all of everything happening with Next Benedict a couple years ago, which I don't know if you were following that. That ended up being like a nationwide series of protests, and that kid was local to Oklahoma. So we had some pretty big events going on. For our challenges, we have received attention in social media engagement from a local branch of a national neo-Nazi group, including hate mail. So our first finding out about this was we actually got a warning system email from the Bridging Divides Institute out of Princeton. If anyone doesn't know about them, they monitor for political violence specifically. And when they think there's stuff that's likely to happen from known groups, they will try and contact you and be like, hey, here's the escalation tools. Here's our assessment of the threat level of this. Here's how we recommend you might want to approach this going forward. I didn't know they existed before we got that. So that was fun. We also got a heads up from a friendly Alaskan activist who was saying things from their national branch and was like, oh, you guys have an official email. Let me just know that there are active neo-Nazis near you who are sharing your social media content to their private groups. So that was fun to navigate for us. I can give you more information on how we navigated that in a moment. With the uptick in that. So there are obviously people who want to help instructing these skills. All right, I'm going to wait till a little bit. There are obviously people who want to jump in and help instruct and share their skills with the community and help make it safe. One of the more interesting challenges we faced is that we were getting a lot of this hate mail and a lot of this more stuff at the same time that we had 3 or 4 increased offers for help, including one from someone whose display name in the email was Maverick Top Gun, and whose email address was the Manimal Fitness, and whose email contained a lot of flags. So we do have to be kind of cautious about how we vet people and how we include new people who want to help us, especially when that coincides with a lot of hate mail and a lot of national intention. In general, the local attention and the social media engagement from known hate groups required us to have increased electronic security, increased infosec, we just be more aware of, hey, how are we dealing with these emails? We're keeping them. We've got a couple people looking into, hey, who posted this email? What do we know about this email address? How long has this email account been in existence? So that was fun. We did also have an in-person participant of, I'll call it questionable intent, using a pseudonym, refused at the door to accept our code of conduct. So that was turned away and de-escalated without anything further, but that is also something, you know, I would say as a challenge, always make sure you have a code of conduct before it is needed, because it does help deter bad faith actors to say, hey, here are the clearly outlined expectations and consequences for breaking. We've also dealt with fraud and intergroup drama in the community that we serve specifically. So our original host venue shut down due to financial mismanagement and potential fraud. We had about 2 months of notice to a different place that was willing to host us. And since we do not have our own liability insurance, we had to find someone willing to take on that liability that wasn't the initial group that we had spoken to. One of the people who offered us resources after that was using a fake name and swindled the community of several $1,000s under the guise of an alleged queer youth resource group. Fortunately, neither of those problems affected us sincerely, but both of those were people who had good community standing, who had offered resources before. So I would say for that, just always vet your resources. And then there was a lawyer who offered us help with bylaws and documents, who has shut his practice, been accused of multiple instances of professional and ethical misconduct, several other things. So all of these were people that we didn't accept. They didn't have a large say in the governance of Queer Club, in part because of the model that we chose, where we were DSA and collaboration with them. But that is definitely something to keep an eye out. And the biggest issues have been resource-based. We are 100% volunteer run, which means functionally, volunteering means you cannot participate fully in our classes. So those interested in our class, those interested in supporting us, typically do not want to stop participating in order to help us run. Martial arts and first aid training gear can be expensive. So that was another thing that we've had to deal with. And finally, scheduling availability in the core team and avoiding burnout. Most good organizing advice is applicable here. DSA schedule overlap has been a big killer for some of our organizational meetings. Whenever there are a lot of DSA things going on, we've alleviated some of that by building redundancy and supporting the most tasks, but it does still occur. Next slide, please. So in terms of advice for similar projects, my biggest piece of advice is have backups. Have backup plans, backup spaces, instructors, locations, and resources. It would not have been possible for us to continue to operate without a location. Backup instructors and shared training and rehearsal help if someone is sick, has a family emergency, is out of town for any reason. And for online spaces, Discord age verification and other tech concerns platforms, think about those before you need to implement, basically. Continually maintain a shared vision. Define your mission early. If your vision isn't shared anymore, you will have issues and drama in your core team. That's not a good place to be at. Use your mission statement to help prioritize if there's a conflict in resources, a threat of burnout, something like this. All of the organizing advice to help you. We're a small enough team to not require a fully formal voting process. We can go with consensus on a lot of smaller things, but other projects may not be. So always define roles and responsibilities, but maintain your flexibility and backups. And with the previous challenges we've had with fraud and drama, sometimes groups and organizations with a solid reputation and status offered resources that they didn't follow through with. A reputable resource will have consistent, clear communication, often from more than one person, including when they tell you no. They're not clear about when they cannot help you. If they're over-promising, that's a big red flag. Someone aligned with your interests will not string you along. Even if their offer is in good faith, over-promising indicates that they may be just prone to over-promising and you shouldn't trust that resource, or that they may be incompetent in securing the help they said they will give you. Finally, you're probably going to draw attention from bad faith groups and individuals. I know DSA as a whole does. So have a code of conduct. You need never use personal info, don't document last names or sensitive info anywhere easily accessed online, and have an information disposal plan, including records, access limitations, and a when your records will be disposed of plan. Since we do have liability waivers, we do require, someone's backup contact, their name, their address, some of that. Those are stored on hard copy. We do have a disposal plan for them, and we have had to dispose of them before. But again, it's just something to be aware of. So that's what I have on this today. Thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely, Jess. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's great to have a really well-established group to be able to lay out not only is this sort of what things look like in the beginning, but these are the sort of continuing practices that you want to be looking at throughout operating on this sort of security basis. So really appreciate you sharing that. Also, just want to extra highlight what Jess mentioned, the like unarmed community self-defense resource that they have put together is so impressive, so comprehensive. I can't recommend it enough. It was a really primary resource for us on DSA's Red Rabbit Security Commission at the national level when we were putting together the standardized training. We're hoping to push out to chapters soon on that. So again, excited for that to come out, but cannot recommend the resources from Oklahoma City Queer Fight Club enough. These comrades have done some really excellent work. So thank you, Jess. So we had Gene from Tucson, and then next we're going to go ahead and have Brett from New Jersey talk to us about the Immigrant Justice Working Group up there. So Chris, if we can have Brett on mute, then we'll rock and roll.
Thanks, Cliff. What's good, comrades? Good to see y'all out here today. I've got a tough act to follow, Jess there, but I'll do my best. Just to give like a little bit of background, I've been in DSA since 2016. I've been up here in New Jersey since 2019, and I've done marshaling for several years, but the way that I got really involved in doing marshaling and security work was following October 7th, 2023. In North Jersey, we have a very large Palestinian population, which consisted of largely people who, there were very few people in the Palestinian community who were experienced organizers or activists or kind of like had much of any experience in terms of marshaling, security, how to kind of like have events like a silent vigil and not be attacked by another thing we have in spades around here, which is really aggressive Zionist communities. We have many of those in North New Jersey as well. So me and another comrade were approached by various groups to help them be able to do things, again, like very simple silent vigils, not even events trying to be, like provocative in any way. And they were being, aggressively attacked by Zionist folks. I preface with this to say that this has grown out of existing relationships that I and others have and existing work that we have been involved in. We did not ever kind of like set out to be a training and security kind of like hub in the area. It emerged as a need with different kinds of work that we got involved in. What has happened, obviously, since the election of Trump is there has been, a huge ramping up again of immigrant justice work. We started a statewide immigrant justice working group shortly after Trump was reelected in order to better coordinate our work across the state. And we're involved in lots of different things from Know Your Rights, rapid response. We coordinate a lot of mutual aid, particularly with local detention center. We're also fighting a campaign against a new detention center that they're trying to start up in a town about half an hour away from me here. So among those things, one of the things that we, of course, have done and we've cultivated over the years is a lot of great relationships with socialist immigrant organizations in New Jersey. And one of the things that we have seen in that context is what is oftentimes seen as a weakness in DSA can be a strength, which is we tend to be whiter than some other organizations. We tend to be not necessarily as rooted in immigrant communities, although, of course, we have, and I know many chapters have many wonderful members who are in those communities, but it does put us in a position where folks like myself, a middle-aged white dude, is well positioned to help to lead and build security for folks who may be more targeted and more impacted by ICE and by law enforcement in general. And so I think it's a really good instance of using again what is sometimes seen as a weakness of DSA, turning it into a strength and helping to build connections. You can go to the next slide, please. So as I said, this has kind of come about pretty informally. As I said, I and another comrade were doing this pretty independently for a while. Since we have ramped up our statewide working group in the last year and a half now, we have done a lot more to onboard more of our immigrant justice working group comrades into being marshals and into de-escalation practices. Um, it's still been pretty informal. We have a formal membership structure for our immigrant justice working group, and so this work is kind of housed within that. So it's not informal in the sense that folks aren't members who have been onboarded into that working group. But we don't have a specific structure for our security work. We kind of use those existing groups and kind of ask for people when we need people for events that come up. And then we offer trainings when needed, kind of on a both kind of generalized trainings on primarily marshaling and de-escalation, but then we also do specialized trainings and briefing meetings for specific events that are coming up. And we do this for obviously for our own events. When we have an action, when we have something coming up, we make sure we have a good, strong marshaling team. We also do it with a lot of coalition events and events for our partner organizations. Again, we have some very strong partner organizations. The picture here, we did this in collaboration with the Palestinian Youth Movement, and we have great partnerships with Cosecha and other great immigrant organizations as well. And we have come really to be seen as a central resource for when these organizations are in need of security for something that they have coming up. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, so I mean, I think like a key win is, really in North Jersey, but to some extent in New Jersey in general, but certainly in North Jersey. Really when these groups are in need of security, we get called. I got called by 4 different May Day events to coordinate security for. Unfortunately, I couldn't personally make it to all of them, obviously, but we made sure that we were able to source people and have people take the lead on coordinating security for those events in partnership with other groups that we recruited marshals for. But it was overwhelming, but it was also, I think, it showed how we were able to, again, by developing these relationships with other groups, and again, from it coming naturally through work that we're already engaged in as a chapter, we've been able to see as it's just like, we need security, call Brett, and then like we'll coordinate from there. And I think this has just kind of been the way it's done. One thing I'm really excited about, both learning from today, from talking with folks, and just kind of like from what's going to come out of this commission, is I think we'll be able to standardize our work better, because it is still fairly informal, but we've been able to get to a point where we currently seem to be like a leader in that space. So that is our next challenge, and again, like very timely that Red Rabbits is being formalized, and I think I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the sort of like standardized practices that they issue so that we're able to better build out our work. We can go and go to the next slide, please. So, advice, I mean, this is just going to kind of be recapping some of the things I've said already. I think like connecting it to existing work makes a lot of sense. Obviously, this is how it started for us. Being involved with Palestine solidarity work, being involved in immigrant justice work naturally lent itself to being able to make those connections to doing security work. Um, again, DSA, generally we are overrepresented in terms of folks who are less likely to get fucked up by police, get harassed by ICE agents. Um, we tend to be overrepresented in people who, are physically able to do this, to do, some of the security work. So I think we are well positioned within a sort of like broader ecosystem of organizations to be a leader in this work. And I think that I hope that people come out of this presentation today feeling like they want to figure out how to get into this work or how to build this work locally. And then just the last point, like I think it's easy to get into this work. Again, excited to see the resources that come from national in short order, which I think will make this even easier in terms of figuring out how to get these trainings. One thing that I think is really valuable is making connections with people who have experience in this. So, folks who've been talking today, who clearly have like a lot of experience with this work. The great thing about DSA is we're a national organization. We have a lot of chapters and a lot of experience we can draw on. And I think that I'm increasingly finding that the more that I'm able to interface with people from other chapters and find out the way that they do work, it really improves what I'm doing as well. So I would encourage folks, again, like figure out where the need is locally, how it connects to your local work, and dive right in. But appreciate you all, and happy to answer any questions folks have once we get to the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. I think that does such a great job of demystifying like what security work actually looks like in a typical DSA chapter and what value it has. Like I think a lot of us often picture the caricature of security being like macho tough guy stuff, or I don't know, like being paranoid and talking in code phrases and shit. And no, like this is what, security work looks like on the ground in reality for DSA. And that doesn't mean every chapter, is going to be like a leader in the community on security work the way it seems like New Jersey is, but that's definitely a possibility where there is that need. And that's a great, niche to be able to fill, to allow not just your DSA chapter, but all the partner orgs and other parts of the community to be able to practice mass politics, to be able to make just average working class people feel safe and comfortable being political protagonists. Like that really is the value of this work. And yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that, Brett. So next we have Jordan, Comrade Jordan from Philadelphia DSA Red Rabbits. Chris, if we can unmute Jordan, then you've got the floor to take it away.
Awesome. I've loved everything I've heard so far. Also, thank you, Brett. Shout out my hometown, Patterson. Um, yeah, I am the co-chair of the Philadelphia DSA Rabbits Working Group. Been the co-chair for 2 years now, and I'm running for re-election for a third year. We're running it back. I have been doing this work I've been doing this work as a member of our Red Rabbits since 2022. Been the co-chair since 2023. And what started as like kind of a movement towards protecting reproductive justice and abortion rights post Dobbs decision has completely transformed the way that we do work in Red Rabbits. Next slide, please. So the overview of Philly DSA's Red Rabbits Working Group's security work. We've been around since 2021. So from my understanding, it seems like we're one of the older chapters, Red Rabbits, which I think is hilarious to think about. And we do security for a wide array of events, from reproductive justice, which is how I got my niche within Red Rabbits, despite having been a DSA member since 2016. We do reproductive justice work, immigrant justice work, which I'm particularly proud of. Similarly to our comrades over in northern New Jersey, We've really spent the last, I would say, year and a half developing that relationship to the point where on May Day, the immigrant justice orgs specifically asked for us to be with them, to be part of their contingent because they trust us, which really meant a lot because that was a relationship that I really, really wanted to bring out going into this term. In regards to the reproductive justice and queer solidarity movements that we've gotten to be a part of, we do clinic defenses, which is basically we counter people that are pro-life evangelicals that go to women's healthcare clinics to harass patients. One of the ways that we really got started in this movement was doing that and building that kind of consciousness. And to be honest, that work got a lot of people interested in DSA and interested in Red Rabbits as a project. And I'm really proud of that because similar to what Comrade Cliff had said earlier, people feeling protagonized in this work and feeling empowered and providing a lens to have that socialist lens of analysis has come a long way in what we've been doing. And that also lends itself to Palestine work, where in our local Philly Palestine coalition, we largely lead the direct action contingent of that group. And we've built up a lot of trust over the last couple of years. And a lot of this work has come down to like building out those community relationships because we have more of a like coalitional model. Like we have a great relationship with the Philly Action Readiness Collective, which is another protest marshaling group in the city. We've got a great relationship with our local SRA chapter. We've got a great relationship with the Untitled Medical Collective in regards to medics. So we've been able to really be kind of a movement incubator with all of this. We're in a good position to protect more at-risk comrades. We do that coalition work with other groups who do security and community defense work. And I would say the core of our work is the building out those relationships element. Next slide. Structure and membership. So this is a newer one that we've been planning out. We have an onboarding form with a couple of questions that we have folks fill out. We also have an internal calendar to keep track of trainings, both with us and also with the community groups that we've been working with for the last couple of years that also have dual card memberships. It's awesome to have people that are DSA members, that are also SRA members, that are also members of the Action Readiness Collective, because we have such a vast pool of knowledge locally that it allows us to all work together, and it's been really awesome. We've been running monthly de-escalation 101 trainings. I actually ran one on Thursday over the past 6 months, and we're aiming to expand to a monthly Stop the Bleed course aspirationally. In that de-escalation 101, we actually got 4 new people that want to join both DSA and Red Rabbits, which was pretty awesome because it was a smaller class, but like 40% of the class immediately wanted to join because they enjoyed training. Part of the onboarding is we ask members to complete de-escalation 101 and also attend an event shadowing a security team member as part of the process, because people can answer all of the questions the right way, but it's different from being out in the actual event. So it gives us an opportunity to see, okay, what are they strong at? Where are they developing? What can be improved on? But the thing is that, you know, I will say, like, we have more of kind of like an abolitionist kind of restorative justice lean where it goes, we don't want to be punitive when people are trying to learn. We very much want to aim towards, all right, I understand why you did this, but here's why this would probably be better. That framing has been really important in growing our membership. And we've become the go-to group for security for events, and we've built trust with a large majority of organizations in Philly. As other comrades had mentioned earlier, like, you know, we're all well aware that like the organization is like overly represented by like folks that are not people of color. And I think that something that we've been able to do with Red Rabbits in Philly is build those relationships and build trust and make it easier for the chapter at large to begin building relationships with more diverse organizations and cross-pollinate and build membership with communities of color that are the ones that are the frontline folks, that are the ones that are disproportionately affected as we deal with the impending rise of fascism in this country. Next slide. Key wins and challenges. We are seen as on call for, I'd ever said, we build a lot of relationships, and this has allowed our chapter as a whole to build on these newly formed relationships. That's been like, I really can't stress enough that like security work, it seems like a small thing, but like you have to remember, like you're being trusted to keep people safe. And that's something that is an important responsibility in the movement, particularly post 2020. that, you know, it takes a lot of trust and connection and communication and working through tensions and working through political disagreement. And we've been able to come out of that really, really well. We've been able to grow Red Rabbits, and we've been able to implement those changes into the way that the chapter conducts our coalitional work. We've been able to mend fences like the Abortion Rights Coalition split that we used to do restorative reproductive justice work with, but now we've joined the coalition. We were able to fix those tensions and work with that. So a lot of our work is rooted in these deep community relationships that we built over the last few years. And I'm really proud of that because I know that occasionally, you know, that is something that we operate off of a learning curve, but I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do in Philadelphia and connecting these movements, being part of the movement ecosystem. Uh, the challenge is standardization. So we've built an admin committee within Red Rabbits over the last couple of months, and it's been great in terms of just keeping track of data, keeping track of information, keeping track of onboarding, and, you know, keeping things in order. It's definitely a learning curve because with most like admin responsibilities, you know, you need to get more people to do it so you don't have one or two people just getting incredibly frustrated maintaining that. So that's been one of the learning curves that we've had. And in terms of like developing community trainings in-house, it's great that we have these folks that are doing that work in the community, but it would be nice to have our own. And we're in the process of doing that, particularly with Stop the Bleed is a big one, and also with firearm safety, which has been sick. We're getting pretty close to getting that one in-house as well. So it's been awesome. Like overall, like these challenges, you know, at the end of the day, this comes with any type of organizing work. There's going to be tensions, there's going to be disagreements, but like in all honesty, when it comes to like the Philadelphia DSA Red Rabbits, like all jokes aside, like we've become a very like dysfunctional family in the best way possible. Like, you know, with movement work like this, it's very emotional, it's very intense, but it also builds a very, very close connection. And I think the last thing I would say to kind of like tie in what Cliff had said earlier about building these relationships and protagonizing, it's important that in security work we realize that it's not about not being afraid, because if somebody's not afraid in this work, I don't really trust them personally. It's about not allowing that fear to paralyze you from acting. And I think that that's kind of like what I would leave on. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Jordan. Thank you so much for sharing, and really glad you mentioned working towards being able to do things in-house as DSA. I think that's really important. It's awesome that there's like a whole ecosystem of other organizations doing security work. But you know, as we've heard earlier from the experience of Oklahoma City and plenty of other places that I could spend the rest of the day listing, sometimes even partner organizations that have been reliable in the past drop the ball, and then we're running trainings that really are not compliant or something like that. And it is really important to make sure that the resources we are using to keep our members safe come from DSA. That is why we have this national infrastructure and staff who are trained and paid to be able to make sure that we are fully compliant in all possible areas, and not just compliant, but also, going above and beyond and making sure we're doing everything the safest way possible. So that's a huge part of the ethos of the Security Commission, the work that we're trying to do to help standardize the security work that so many DSA chapters are doing. So it is just really heartening to hear, like, from chapters that are at the very beginning of this process, who are very aware of that, and chapters who have been doing this for a while. That's like a priority of, we want to standardize and make sure that we're doing everything compliantly and in-house. So that really is a key focus. So thank you, Jordan, for sharing. Um, you had another slide. I don't know if you already rolled that into everything. We can bring you back on if not. All right, Jordan's got his hand raised if we want to unmute him.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I got really excited, so I like dropped the ball on that. Advice for chapters forming Red Rabbits. This work is relational. Build trust over time internally, and you'll be better suited to work with community members. I cannot stress enough that, again, because this work is trust and relationship based, you have to acknowledge that sometimes it'll be easier other times, and it'll be more difficult other times. Like when I remember during the student encampments, DSA didn't have the best relationship within the Palestine Solidarity movement, but we built that, and we were there basically, like, we were there all the time with the folks, and over time that really built those relationships out to the point where some of them joined Red Rabbits and joined DSA, and we've fostered lifelong bonds with these folks, and that means the world. Take an active role in the planning process. Try to get as much as possible to ensure informed consent for decisions. Cannot stress that enough. Be part of the planning process. It seems really tedious and it might seem really annoying, but you want to have as much information as possible for when you bring it back to your safety team. So that way we can ensure as much informed consent as possible. We have a big policy within Philly of not protest policing, but the idea is in the same realm. That means that we want as much information as possible when folks are making these decisions. And the last one is ask questions. We keep us safe. I have one member that I've been training up to be an action lead, and our goal is for having 10 action leads, 10 people comfortable being safety leads in the next year. We've hit 7 this year, so we're expanding that to 10. And one of them will ask me a million questions and then apologize, saying, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Like, no, ask questions, ensure everything is as detailed as possible. And yeah, curiosity is important in this work, and it can lead to better practices and procedures. That's the last one. Apologies, everyone. Thank you, Comrade Cliff, for catching that.
No problem. Thank you, Jordan. That's great. So next we have Rodrigo from the Austin DSA Red Bats. Chris, if we can unmute Rodrigo, then you have the floor, comrade.
Thank you, Cliff. My name is Rodrigo. I am a member of the Austin DSA Red Bats, and then separately, I am a co-chair of Austin DSA's Safety Training and Certification Committee. And these are kind of two distinct groups that I'll talk about in my slides. So Austin's Red Bats began and remains an informal group. It's not officially written into, it was not passed by any resolution, not created by any resolution, not in any bylaws or anything like that. It exists as a group of DSA members, usually having served on our leadership committee or just generally very involved in DSA. They communicate via Signal and are concerned with event safety and protest marshaling. This group predated my return to the chapter. I was a paper member for many years, originally joined DSA 2017, and then came back in 2024 and am now more properly involved. And I believe that this group was created after 2020. So it's been around for a few years. Next slide. Last year, in August, we passed a resolution titled Resolution for a Democratic Socialist Safety Training and Certification Program, which created the Safety Training and Certification Committee to last through our chapter convention, which is in a week. This committee was charged with creating a program where we can pay or reimburse members and encourage members of the chapter to get trained in the following: CPR and AED training, first aid training, stop the bleed training, and Narcan administration, which is not necessarily a training or a certification you can get. We approved $2,500 for training reimbursements, as in reimbursing people for the training fees that they had to pay. And we, let's see, I got some numbers here. Actually, we can go to the next slide and before I talk about those. We don't have internal first aid trainings or CPR trainings, stop the bleed trainings. We have done some de-escalation trainings, but to get our members actual certifications, we learned, like, we thought we can't actually just do in-house trainings. If, let's say, somebody wants this training, this certification for their job, they need an actual proper certification. We early on knew we could partner with this really fantastic volunteer-run organization called Street Medics of Austin. These guys, in addition to supplying the public with free first aid trainings, stop the bleed training, chemical safety training, they also provide free on-the-ground event support at protests, rallies, and community events. They're really fantastic people, very knowledgeable. A lot of them are, nurses or have worked in the medical field. We have learned quite a bit from them, and they are generally a resource that we are very happy to have. They have in the past provided support at DSA events. We see them at every protest in town, every rally, and they train a lot of people. We did in the fall a first aid and CPR training with them. We had about 22 chapter members, Austin DSA chapter members, do that training. And then this spring, we had another like 20 or so chapter members do a Stop the Bleed training with Street Medics of Austin. Those trainings would have cost $1,700. We were equipped to reimburse our members for all of that, but we learned that people weren't really interested in being reimbursed. They were content to pay their own fees. They were just motivated to get these trainings once we said Austin DSA is partnering with Street Medics of Austin to have a training for our chapter members. We only ended up reimbursing people $320 out of the possible $2,500. I think people are very interested in these trainings. The barrier to entry isn't the fee, it's just that they don't necessarily know that where to get the training or when to get the training. So in thinking of our report back for our convention in a week, looking forward to what we do in the next year. We're just going to schedule more trainings, lower the amount of money that we require for the campaign or for the committee. Yeah, let's see. I want to speak, let's go to the next slide, to some challenges that we have faced. De-escalation training. Street Medics of Austin doesn't do de-escalation training. We do provide in-house de-escalation training because a couple of our chapter members and the Red Bats are pretty adept at de-escalation. But we find that de-escalation is something that's unlike first aid or CPR or stop the bleed. It's a little more difficult to become adept at it. You have to really practice, rehearse, and then do it. For me, it's something that's very, I'm unsure when I'm going to be confident to tell someone I'm very equipped at de-escalation training because I don't do it that often. So we don't really have a firm plan in place to how we can regularly offer de-escalation training and then further provide space for our members to practice it. That's something we're still chewing on. Next slide, please. Interesting challenge. In the last year, as a response to the Palestine liberation movement, our lovely Texas Senate passed this bill called the Campus Protection Act. It amends some of the language in the education code around free speech, saying that changing things such as we will ensure that all persons may assemble peaceably on the campus of institutions of higher education for expressive activities. 2, we will ensure that students enrolled at and employees of an institution of higher education may assemble peaceably on the campus of the institution. And that an institution of higher education shall ensure that the common outdoor areas of the institution's campus are deemed traditional public forums. Now it reads, an institution of higher education shall permit students enrolled at and employees of the institution to engage in expressive activities. Basically saying if you're not affiliated with the school, you're not allowed to come to a campus protest, you're not allowed to maybe even be on campus. Street Medics of Austin, would be at many student protests for the Palestine Liberation Movement. They showed up one day for a campus protest, and post this bill, they were approached by employees of the University of Texas saying, you have to leave. Like, well, can we see your campus ID? And when they said, we're not, we don't have campus ID, you have to leave, or you'll face trespassing charges. So Street Medics of Austin decided we cannot do anything on campus anymore. Similarly, Austin DSA safety work and DSA team, we have received a couple requests for a safety presence at some campus events, and we've similarly have said we can't really do that. So the solution to this, we quickly thought, was, well, we can have people in our YDSA chapter do that safety work. Maybe we train them in safety work, and then they can be the presence on campus because they are UT students. It also then had us it forced us to acknowledge that our relationship with our YDSA chapter needs to be strengthened, because we didn't really know how to get in touch with them and really advertise that we can pay you to go get first aid training and we can teach you how to do de-escalation. So that's something we're still working on. Next step, next slide, please. Let's see. In a week, our safety training and certification committee disbands. That was the length of the resolution. We are changing our bylaw, or proposing an amendment to the bylaws to make it the safety committee a permanent subcommittee of the logistics and planning committee. That would prevent us from having to then pass a resolution every year or so, or every 6 months, saying we would like there to be a safety and training and certification committee. This next step, this next point, formalizing Red Bats as a working group, is something we're still discussing. So we have a safety team that provides ground support in a similar way to Street Medics of Austin at our Austin DSA events, saying we will send some people there that have first aid training, CPR training. They'll be responsible for knowing where the fire extinguishers are, and knowing all the exits and entrances to a place. Red Bats do some more door watching, keep an eye out for suspicious individuals, and do protest marshaling. And I think they're going to remain an informal group, a separate group from the more medic-oriented work we do. And we're just constantly talking about how institutionalized do we want to make that marshaling part of our work. Next slide, please. So I have some recommendations, and then some more notes that I wrote down but didn't put in some slides that I want to share before I pass the mic to the next presenter. So I recommend that other chapters very clearly establish what your committee does, what your security committee or your safety committee does and doesn't do. So we were asked to provide some safety coordination at an event, a public event around anti-ICE organizing. The place we were hosting this anti-ICE organizing fair they were a little nervous about being targeted by protesters or by ICE themselves. The people in our chapter organizing this fair said, don't worry, we will be providing security at your event. I think security versus safety, there's two different implications to the general public. Security people can be, licensed individuals, armed licensed individuals who maybe pat you down, do metal detecting on the entrance. We don't check IDs, we don't pat you down, we don't carry firearms. I don't want to put my committee members in a position where they have to get in a physical altercation with anybody, and I don't want people we collaborate with, other orgs, to think that that's what we will be providing. We are very clear in saying we will have people on that are on site with some training in first aid, with Narcan, with some stop to bleed kits. We will have people there that are door watching, but they, in the case that an armed individual shows up, and in Texas there are a lot of armed individuals, we don't have firearms to defend ourselves, right? We say we will have an evacuation plan, we will do this, but we don't want to lead. We don't want to put out any false expectations. Let's see. A couple other things I want to say. Along the lines of establishing what you do and what you do not do, as we started getting into this committee work, the safety committee work, we would get some requests fielded our way. And an early request was by one of our chapter members who was reporting on behalf of a coffee shop where DSA often hosts events. This coffee shop said that some of their employees were being harassed, some of their trans employees were being harassed by members of the public, and that could the safety team or Red Bats do anything about that? We quickly decided that we're only going to field requests for like DSA events, DSA sanctioned events, both at a capacity. We don't have, I think, the people power to go do community defense for just any given organization or business. We don't want to put our chapter members in a position where they're by themselves, door watching at a public place at random hours. We think that if our chapter members are better equipped with life-saving skills, if they are out in the public, they are more likely to be able to help in cases of emergency. So that's kind of a knock-on benefit to the work that we do. But we can't protect everybody in the community. We can protect people that attend our events, and we had a lot of public events, and we can try to protect our chapter members as they are out in the general public. For example, we do a lot of electoral canvassing here in Austin. That means we're door knocking. Like I said, a lot of people in Texas have guns. In our most recent electoral campaign, one of our chapter members was threatened with a non-visible gun, said, "Get off my property, or I'll grab my gun." Luckily, it didn't come to that. Chapter member said, "Okay, I'm leaving," walked off. But we're always trying to be prepared for the case where maybe that gun does come out, maybe someone does get shot. I want there to be someone on the canvassing team with stop the bleed training that can potentially save a life. So that's the kind of things that we know we can do and realistically achieve. Just protect our members, protect people at our events. Let's see. And then I think a success that I really like to highlight is that this safety training work that we do, both organizing the trainings and then having people go to GBM and be the medic at our general body meeting or be the medic at a public event that we have, it's kind of an empowering role for people that maybe are new to the chapter, are new organizers. It gives them a very specific thing they can do and a very specific way they contribute to the success of our work. I think it's an easy way for people to really dip their toe into a more involved presence in our chapter. And so that, I think, is actually a big benefit to doing this work. Let's see, that's all for me. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rodrigo, for sharing all of that. I really, really like this example that Austin is providing I think of correct priorities for like what the steps are of building out a security body. You know, some chapters are able to offer very robust defense for basically any situation that may occur. And if that's the case for your chapter, that's great. If it's not, it's absolutely necessary to set those really clear expectations, like it looks like Austin is doing, and also prioritizing. Let's put the horse in front of the cart. If we don't have de-escalation training, then that needs to be a priority before we go to anything else. So really glad to hear that, you know, the sounds like the priorities are in order. Hopefully, you know, we will have the national de-escalation training available for you in the next month. But this is really, really cool work, and also just really awesome to hear about the Austin Street Medic team. You know, not every city has that. That's a huge, huge benefit to have. I love stuff like that. I'm an EMT, so I always nerd out about that. But yeah, thank you again, Rodrigo. And then finally, we have Comrade C from Portland DSA. So if we can unmute Comrade C, then you've got the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, comrades. I'm C. I am the current co-chair of Portland DSA. I am also the former safety team co-chair, and prior to that, I was in Seattle DSA, where I was the co-chair of the mobilization committee, which was their equivalent of a safety team, and the anti-fascist working group. Next slide, please. So I always like to preface discussions like these with a sort of content warning that there are a lot of topics of violence that we may have to deal with. In the Northwest in particular, we have a lot of really violent white supremacists, and we have a history of that, of dealing with that from the beginning of colonialization and settler imperialism through the modern era now, where we have Proud Boys, we have Patriot Prayer, we have a whole host of state and non-state fascists to deal with. I like to use this image to kind of preface this because these women in yellow shirts here during the 2020 protests were a group known as the Wall of Moms. And for me, that's a really fascinating sort of ad hoc formation that arose in response to the protests, where you had just community members coming out to help keep each other safe, right? And we saw repeatedly throughout 2020, sort of like how Cliff mentioned earlier, there's this perception that safety, security, etc., are done only by one type of people, but you have these middle-aged moms coming out forming huge lines, 100 strong, preventing the state from doing violence to more vulnerable members. And we don't think of these people as doing safety. And so as we're working as socialists to create conditions of safety, we have to remember that it's a collective practice. Next slide. These are some of the folks that have been killed by white supremacists in Portland over the years, many of them throughout the first Trump regime. And I always try to ground my work in the reality that safety work is dangerous. And we are doing this to help minimize this as much as possible. And that when we don't have collective practices, it does make the situation a lot more unsafe and a lot more likely that violence will occur. Next slide, please. So the safety team's origins can be traced through the long history of Portland's anti-racist and anti-fascist organizing throughout the 80s and 90s in particular. This was really galvanized in the 80s by the murder of an Ethiopian immigrant by the name of Mulugeta Sura, who was killed by local neo-Nazis. The team itself formed during the first Trump administration At that time, there were fascists regularly coming into Portland, organizing with some local elements, but often coming from the surrounding suburban towns, or even just traveling up and down the I-5 corridor. Like, I'm sure many of you had experience with that yourselves, or may remember, throughout 2017 to 2021, basically every weekend in the summer, fascists were going to another town, whether it was Berkeley, Olympia, Salem, San Francisco, wherever, they'd come and invade, do a march, attack folks. Here in Portland, that included attacks on DSA meetings, disrupting ISO events. That's a defunct organization, the International Socialist Organization. They attacked houseless encampments, queer neighborhoods. They would swarm like leftist-friendly buildings or businesses. There used to be a tavern in town called Cider Riot that folks would gather at, especially after meetings. And after May Day one year, they attacked that location and significantly injured one person. Locally, 6 people have been murdered by the far right between 2017 and 2022. And yeah, we just constantly having to deal with these attacks is what led to the creation of our team. Next slide, please. So we assist comrades with both public and private chapter events, especially those with more public visibility. That can be anything from a meeting to the full chapter coming together. It can be a rally. It can be, like a town hall. It can be whatever the chapter needs. We do de-escalation, door watch. We have medics, some limited coverage of our socialists in office, and I'll talk more about that later. Locally, we refer to the sort of community or public traffic control at like marches and rallies as corking, which is a term that comes out of like radical bike groups. And it's basically just, as was discussed earlier, folks with their cars or bikes keeping traffic out of march spaces. It's a great way of building like dual power in your community. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also do regular trainings in all these functions. We have some limited overlap on information security with other chapter elements, including our internal organizing committee and administrative committee. Next slide, please. Yeah, and kind of touching on what our comrades in Austin raised, like, we don't call ourselves a security team. Partly that's a legal thing where in Oregon, security is like more of a traditional non-police, non-law enforcement agency or business. But also, we've just had a lot of problems in the greater social justice movement in Portland where there are folks who come and like self-appoint themselves as security. And these are the folks who do match the stereotype that Cliff raised. There's a lot of gendered and ableist divisions in that, anti-democratic practices. And so for us, it raised the question of like, who's allowed to keep us safe? And it should be everybody. We have comrades with disabilities who engage in safety. We have comrades who are come from all sorts of social, political backgrounds, folks with white skin, black skin, Muslims, Jews, atheists. We have a very wide, diverse community of folks, not only within DSA, but within the broader social justice movement in Portland who engage in this work. And what these security teams were doing were they were pushing people out who should and were trying to help keep us all safe. It is a collective practice. It's a holistic practice. It's not about individualistic efforts. Safety for me is something that goes beyond questions of security. It's about asking, like, if you're helping secure a building for a meeting, you're doing door watch. you should also know, like, is there a first aid kit? Is there an AED? Is there a fire extinguisher? You know, if you're organizing a chapter like river raft trip, you know, a nice little social event, safety's role in that is, are there, you know, vests to wear when you get in the rafts? Is the person leading the raft certified to do that, or, you know, trained to do that? That kind of thing. It's also a way of building dual power. So corking in particular has been really effective in Portland at creating community structures that took over formerly state operations. Cops make a lot of overtime doing traffic control at public events. One, they do it very poorly. We saw this especially at the most recent No Kings event in Portland, where cops only corked half a road. So you still had oncoming traffic at the beginning of the march route until like 5-10 minutes before the march started. They also let through multiple cars throughout the march. And we don't do that. We are much more effective at it. It denies cops the ability to collect overtime from doing this work, and it grows the community's trust in each other. Next slide, please. The safety team is a non-political decision-making body within the chapter. So what I mean by that is we don't get to decide if an event happens. We're here to advise and assist. That's not the role of safety to say, no, you can't have a march. The role of safety is to say, how can we help facilitate you have a march? We get requests for aid from chapter leadership. That could be the steering committee, it can be from working groups or other committees or ad hoc formations. Membership's open to all members in good standing. We're constantly recruiting, intentionally recruiting folks from marginalized backgrounds. We have a large pool of volunteers, some of which are paper members. Right now, we're kind of broadly split into 3 groups of corkers, de-escalators, and our recently formed Cascadian volunteer medic team. Within the team itself, members can apply to become leads for organizing responsibility. So you can just be a member who just comes to help when you can, but if you want to actually like become more involved in the planning and like the long-term structure, setting up training sessions, things like that, liaisoning with other groups within and without DSA, you have to apply to become a lead. Leads can run to be co-chairs and secretary, but the whole team gets to vote on those leadership positions. Next slide. Decisions are made at regular meetings, and volunteers are recruited for events there. We try to do at least 1 meeting a month. Sometimes we do more, depending on if there's like a really big event coming up that needs more in-depth work. Team members undergo regular trainings, and some members can also offer these trainings. So that's de-escalation, stop the bleed, CPR. We also do less commonly using like our different tools, like our radios, flashlights, other nonviolent safety methods, like the use of umbrellas and signs to screen out fascists. Sometimes we'll do like role-playing elements to get people ready for if we know like an aggressive counter demonstrator is going to be there. We get help from the National Lawyers Guild with Know Your Rights training. We've had corking volunteers do corking trainings before and so on. Most of our trainings are open to the chapter and the public. There's a couple that we do just for safety team members specifically, but those are only like in response to specific threats that we know will be present. Next slide. Some of our wins, we recovered from the post-2020 slump and some chapter internal conflicts that were related to the 2021 National Convention. So during 2020 and through most of 21, the team was really big, but after these things, just like how DSA in general kind of had a slump in membership, it affected the team. We are now one of the most widely respected safety groups in the city, both with organized groups and autonomous formations. This is one of the really big wins of that was in 2023 when we had a historic strike by the teachers union here. They came to us to do corking for their regular marches and rallies. They didn't go to the cops, and so that was a really significant victory because it was a shift in how unions, especially these large 1,000 plus member unions, viewed the safety groups within the city. We have a newly formed medic team, which debuted at May Day and did really, really well. We had some counter protesters show up and they pepper sprayed a bunch of people, maced a bunch of people. So our medic team was really key in responding to that and treating that. And just a few months ago, we held our first 2-day intensive training. So it was like a weekend long, covered a lot of medic stuff, de-escalation, political theory and education, as well as like some history of anti-fascist organizing in Portland. Next slide. Challenges. This is a new one for us, protecting socialists in office. This is an ongoing conversation within our team. Portland DSA has 4 city council members out of 12. We also have a couple of state house reps and will likely have more soon. Unfortunately, some of those events that these folks hold are open to the public, and anyone from the public can come, and boy do they. So having to adapt how we respond to those threats in those situations. This can include like territory that isn't friendly to socialists. Like if you're on city hall grounds, there's lots of cops there. They have their own private security in the building as well. It's right across the street from a federal building, and there's lots of federal property around, so that raises a lot of legal issues. So some of the tactics that we might use in other situations would not be applicable there. Also, like if they're holding a town hall, like members of the public can come and make their thoughts and feelings known, and that includes fascists, unfortunately. And so having to, find where the line is of keeping them safe and the other attendees safe, but also not causing political damage to the org. Also, educating members on chapter policy. Portland DSA has a policy of members are not allowed to communicate with the police regarding chapter work. That the only exception being if there's like a life-threatening situation. And as we grow as a chapter, we get a lot of like newly radicalized liberals who maybe haven't like internalized abolitionist practices yet. Having to educate those folks about like what does it mean if you're in a situation and a fascist with a gun, because like Texas and Arizona and other places, Oregon and Washington, where we have a branch in Vancouver, are both open carry states, with some weird rules around that. But like if somebody with a gun walks up and starts yelling at you, a lot of people's natural inclination is, I'm going to find a police officer to deal with this. And unfortunately, the case is in Portland, as in many other places, the cops are very friendly with fascists. And they are not going to be helpful in that situation. So finding ways to de-escalate, redirect attention away from the crowd onto safety volunteers is critical. we've had to deal with a lot of injuries. Unfortunately, one of the things that came out of 2020 nationwide, not just here, but vehicular assaults have gone up. There is rarely a big march that we don't have to deal with a very angry driver. Also, any sort of protests regarding ICE facilities or ICE officers are likely to get very violent very quickly, instigated by ICE officers. So we just did a big march on the ICE facility in town at the end of January that was in coalition with like 50 some odd unions, which was amazing. We had like 10,000 people out there, and the march was totally peaceful. And as soon as we got to the ICE building, immediately they just started tear gassing entire blocks worth of the local neighborhood. So a lot of members got injured there. We're increasingly dealing with some really aggressive local fascists who will like immediately resort to chemical weapons. So being prepared for pepper spray, for mace, for bear spray, even like bug sprays is something to keep in mind, which also contributes to like emotional and mental strain. Plus like frequent requests for aid just leads to a lot of member disengagement or burnout. So developing like action aftercare procedures has become a new task that we've been taking up. And also like post 2020 changes in police tactics and prosecution. So for example, Portland, Seattle, and several other major cities in the US after 2020 sent cops to the UK to study some of their protest related tactics. And during 2020 and prior, typically cops would not insert themselves into a march or a rally or whatever. They would hang off on the sides, wait for something to happen, and then move in. What they are now doing is organizing teams who will deliberately go into a space and start interacting with community members, deliberately to like try to disrupt things, but also to identify like protest organizers. We used to have police liaisons in the chapter that were like our official folks to kind of negotiate, by which I mean like delay and buy time for events to happen. We have discontinued that practice because what we found is since the cops have changed their tactics, they are now identifying these people and threatening them with arrest if like we attempt to march in the street without a permit and things like that. Unfortunately, this has created some tension with liberal organizations like 5051 and Indivisible who do work with police. 5051 locally allows cops to cork their marches. Their excuse is that the marches are so big that they don't have enough volunteers. Our retort is community will show up if you work with them. We saw this in 2020 where marches of similar or larger sizes were entirely protected by local volunteers and not by cops. There's also like just open collaboration between the far right and law enforcement, especially ICE. The local ICE facility has been bringing in right-wing streamers and like giving them access. They will like film protests from the roof. They've been bringing in even there's a term in anti-fascist organizing called the three-way fight. So like in the post-war period, long story short, basically is like you have anti-fascists, the state, and non-state fascists. And a lot of non-state fascists used to really get in arguments and fights with the state. So like you can think of like the militia movement of the 90s, right? But what we have found is the state is one recruiting out of far right groups for ICE. We know that there are Proud Boys. We know that there are Oath Keepers and other types like this in ICE. And two, locally, ICE has been inviting far right groups into the facility and giving them tours and allowing them to film protests and whatnot. So yeah, it's just a blatant, abundantly clear thing that we have to deal with now, where even the veil of separation is gone between these groups, and there's no three-way fight anymore. Next slide, please. Advice for folks trying to form a new group or work on elements that they already have. Keep your meetings focused. It's really easy to start, reminiscing about the past and just be like, oh, remember that time we did X and how fun it was or how scary it was, and then it was fun afterwards. We can laugh about it now, but so like try to avoid nostalgia, but also like in the sense of don't assume that how things operated in the past is how they're going to operate in the present. Again, like the state is always evolving its tactics, fascists are evolving their tactics. Like historically, a lot of fascist groups were like white supremacist groups. And while they still are, groups like the Proud Boys or locally, we have a group called Patriot Prayer. These are multiracial groups that are more united by hatred of like women, and queer people, especially trans people, than they are necessarily around race. So keep in mind that like how things were are not necessarily how they are. The material conditions will change. Train together and also hold socials. You got to create the conditions for social bonding and cohesion. Like this, you can't just like throw people in the field together without any practice, without any experience or things. Oh, I'm getting the wrap up music. But yeah, develop relationships outside of DSA, especially if you don't have areas of expertise that you need. Like if you don't have medics, find medics, work with them, and don't peace police. Like this has already been brought up, but like if you're in the middle of a march or something and somebody starts spray painting or like throws a rock at a window or whatever, you don't have time to have a political discussion about like why certain tactics are less viable, and attempts to do that will just potentially create scenarios where it gives the cops an excuse to move in and start arresting everybody. So like hold those discussions for afterwards. Next slide. Yeah, train your members in operating standards and expectations. You want to grow internal discipline through shared struggle and political education. We just did a reading at our intensive of Why Misogynists Make Great Informants, which is a work I highly recommend about like gendered violence within left-wing spaces. You're here to serve the people and DSA. You're not here to peace police. Don't do the state's job for it. We Keep Us Safe is not just a slogan, it's a program for action. It's something that you can like put out into the world. Next slide. And I just want to close with this poem from the survivor of a train attack that left 2 people dead when they stood up to a fascist who was harassing young Muslim women. I am alive. I spat in the eye of hate and lived. This is what we must do for one another. We must live for one another. We must fight for one mother. We must die in the name of freedom if we have to. Luckily, it's not my turn today. Solidarity, comrades, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, C. That's a great note to close on. Portland clearly has a really, really highly developed security, safety, whatever you want to call it, program, and that's excellent to see. We love to see those models for other DSA chapters that are doing this work. I think the question of protection for socialists in office is really interesting to think about, and one that's going to be more and more pertinent as time goes on. I think that's a movement tradition that goes all the way back to the election of 1860 with the wide awakes, and unfortunately, I think we're starting to see similar conditions there where that may be increasingly necessary. So glad to see that Portland is grappling with that. So, comrades, that is the conclusion of the scheduled speakers. We have 5 minutes left before the hour. I'm actually not sure what's going to happen. We may be kicked off at the hour, but I'm going to operate on the assumption that we're not. Anybody who has to go obviously can go, but we're going to do a little Q&A. And so if we're able to do it, this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm opening the chat for everybody now. And if you have questions for any of the panelists or anybody here from the Security Commission, go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. I will pick questions and direct them to the panelists, and then panelists, if one of the questions that I've read out loud is something that you want to answer, you can just use the raise hand feature and we can bring you on and unmute you. So you should have access to the chat. Everybody in the meeting, if somebody can just throw a message in there that says hi or something, so I know it's working. Okay, perfect. So we have the chat. Okay, I see a quick question I can address. Where will the recording be available? Probably on the DSA forums is where it'll be posted. Obviously, we're going to have to, edit and, put all the little videos together and all of that. So once that's done, that will be posted to the forum, and it is recorded so that anyone in DSA will be able to access this. Okay, we have a question for Jess from Oklahoma City. Not sure if Jess is still here because I can't see the participants at the moment, but would you be open to sharing the training doc you referenced? Jess has her hand raised. Chris, if you want to unmute Jess for us.
Okay. Now.
Jess,
Fantastic.
unfortunately, oh, now we can hear you. Okay, go ahead. Okay, never mind. Sorry, Jess. You're breaking up and we can't hear you. Happily, I can share that Oklahoma City Queer Fight Club does have their resources available online. What I can do is make sure to include the link to those resources in the forums post with this recording, so that everybody has that available. Sorry about that, Jess. Okay, and we have a question here. Thoughts on OPSEC, which is operational security, when collaborating event security across multiple organizations. So if anybody who's a panelist has thoughts on that, feel free to raise your hand and we can address that in the chat. Okay, Brett, I saw you first.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of collaboration with different orgs on security, and I think in particular, this comes up a lot when we're doing security for an event that's led by other organizations. There's, I think, a need for communication about what the norms are. So, like C mentioned about like talking to police, not talking to police. That's a question I definitely always ask is like for event organizers, it's like, is this permitted? Do you want to have a police liaison? Do we need someone who's interfacing with the police, or are we not looking to do that? Because different organizations have different orientations to those types of questions. I think another point that was raised about just kind of like we have to stay true to our principles within that. So like to points about like we are not policing people, like we hold those abolitionist principles really clear, and we have to make those clear sometimes to folks just to kind of, let people know that like we are not going to be the people kind of like micromanaging the behavior of folks and being like they can't do this, they can't do this, and like if that's what they're looking for, they need somebody else. So I mean, I think like having alignment on those things and having discussions about those types of questions can be really important to making sure that nobody thinks that security means something and then other people think it means something else.
Cool. And we can take C next, answering the same question. Are we able to unmute C? Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, just to build off what Brett said, working with your partners is critical. So understanding like what they're comfortable with. Typically, we don't use high-vis vests for our de-escalators in Portland, but we do for our corkers because it's good with like just traffic in general. But if a partner org really wants us to be identified in that way, then we will. But other things are like just like basic OPSEC procedures. You know, wear a hat, wear a mask, like a COVID mask. You know, wear sunglasses. And at like the planning stages, you should know who within your team is going to be the liaison, and like communicating that will limit like the exposure of all your members within like this broader coalition or multi-group formation, whatever it is. Also like talk at the start, like just understand like what are people's risks that they have and what are they comfortable taking. So like Sunrise nationally has been doing a lot of like more high risk stuff for like official orgs, like the No Sleep for Ice campaign, things like that. Their partners in immigration organizations might not be as ready to engage in that work because of like their immigration status, right? At the same time, also like respect individuals' own personal risk assessment. If you have comrades who are disabled, like we've had folks in wheelchairs show up and be in the front lines doing de-escalation work. It's amazing. You know, don't count somebody out just because of their identity. Check.
Awesome. So I'll keep an eye on the chat if there's any more questions there. A question that I have for the panelists is what sort of resources, what sort of infrastructure, advice, whatever it may be, are you looking for from DSA National in terms of your security or safety work? I don't know if any of the panelists have thoughts on that. We have discussed it a little bit already in terms of like what trainings people are looking for. I'm just curious, especially from the chapters that are like just getting this work started, if there are particular resources you're looking for beyond what's already been discussed here today. And if not, that's okay. More of a comment that having national standard training might help reluctant chapters move towards this work. I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people just don't really know where to start, even if they have seen the necessity for it. And having those resources come from the national organization, I think would help give people the confidence to take the initiative on it. So that's a good point. So I'm seeing most people are heading out. I don't see other questions in the chat. We've got some good discussion going in the chat, which I don't want to shut down, but no more questions, not seeing anybody raising hands to answer. So we'll go ahead and end the panel here. Really appreciate everybody coming out. Oh, and before we go, I see Jess, if we want to unmute Jess. Hopefully the mic will work.
Okay. Is that going okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I was going to say definitely online infosec. A lot of the investigation and resource for that, especially after we started getting harassment, had to come from us. And we did request training from Red Rabbits at the time that we faced that issue. But they didn't really have anything for us. It was just sort of a, hey, meeting security, the same standard training that they offer. So anything for like more detailed infosec in the face of known threats and known online threats would be good. Yeah. As well as like sort of counterintelligence? Like, how do you recommend that people do that without putting their info out when you know there are local bad faith actors?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points. And just to kind of share the broader, oh, I didn't know if Jess, are you still going? Okay, I see Jess unmuted. So yeah, definitely great points. Just to kind of share the broader vision for the Security Commission, the trainings that we'll hopefully have available for everybody in DSA in the next month are on 5 basic security skills. So that is de-escalation as the foundation for everything else, stop the bleed, firearm safety, unarmed self-defense, and protest marshaling. So we want to have a national standard for all of those things. And our goal and our mandate from the NPC is to make sure that 40% of DSA chapters at minimum have 5 members who have completed those trainings and are part of some sort of security or safety body. So that's the mandate that we're working on in the immediate term. And many of us share a vision for once that's accomplished, moving on towards national standards and recommendations for InfoSec and OPSEC and handling these more complex situations that Jess has brought up. Because again, that's just something we're going to see increasingly as more and more opposition, an increase in political violence that is obvious for everyone to see, just in general in the American political economy. So these resources are absolutely necessary. So yeah, we'll go ahead and end the panel there. Big thank you to everybody for coming out. Huge thank you to the panelists and the members of the Security Commission for helping us run this. Very, very glad that we can get started standardizing this work for DSA. It is important. It is a necessary ingredient for mass politics. We want everyday working class people to see themselves as political protagonists, and that requires feeling comfortable being a political actor. So really happy to see all the enthusiasm for making that a reality. And thanks again. Solidarity forever, y'all. Bye-bye.